All right, welcome back. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating and, let's be honest, controversial figures in all of pop culture. The killer who hunts other killers. You know the type, right? The vigilante who steps completely outside the law to deliver their own brand of final, brutal justice.
But that brings up a really kind of uncomfortable question, doesn't it? I mean, when we're watching these shows or reading these comics, why do we find ourselves actually rooting for them? Why are we so drawn to characters who are, let's face it, serial killers?
Okay, so to get to the bottom of that, let's kick things off with the version we all know and love, the fictional vigilante archetype that we see all over our screens. I mean, just think about it for a second. Two of the biggest, most iconic anti-heroes from the last few decades. You've got Dexter Morgan, the friendly neighborhood blood spatter analyst with a very dark secret. And then you have Frank Castle, the hardcore military vet we all know as the Punisher. Now, what's really interesting here is how they're separated by the rules they live by. You see, Dexter has the code, this super strict set of guidelines for only killing really, really bad people who slip through the cracks of the justice system. The Punisher, though, nah, he's declared a one-man war on all crime. His justice is swift, brutal, and absolute. And it's these moral frameworks, these codes, that kind of give us, the audience, permission to cheer for them. And wow, are they popular. I mean, it's undeniable. Dexter ran for 8 seasons, then it got a sequel series, and now there's a prequel in the works. And The Punisher. He's been a staple in Marvel Comics since way back in 1974, with tons of movies and his own super popular TV show. It's pretty clear we are absolutely fascinated by this whole idea. But here's where it gets really interesting. This whole archetype, it's not just something we made up for stories. The impulse for vigilante justice, it is very, very real. So let me tell you about Marianne Bachmeier. Back in the 1980s, her story absolutely gripped Germany. She was just a single mom whose entire world was just shattered by a crime you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. What happened next is just heart-wrenching. First, the absolutely horrific murder of her little girl. Then, to make it even worse, the killer comes out with this insulting, ridiculous lie in his confession. You can just feel the justice system failing her in real time. So, on the third day of the trial, she did the unthinkable. She smuggled a pistol into the courtroom and fired 8 shots. The system was just too slow, so she decided to deliver the sentence herself.
And her words, right after the shooting. There's no complex code here, no noble mission. It's just the raw, unfiltered rage of a grieving mother. She just said, "I hope he's dead." And just like that, public opinion was split right down the middle. A lot of people started calling her a hero.
But okay, if you're looking for a real-life story that almost perfectly maps onto the fictional characters we've been talking about, you have got to hear about Pedro Rodrigues Filho. I mean, his nickname pretty much says it all, the Brazilian Dexter. The details of this guy's life are just staggering. His whole killing spree started when he was just a teenager, right after his pregnant girlfriend was murdered. He claimed he killed over 100 people, but, and here's the crazy part, he had a code. He only went after other suspected criminals. We're talking drug dealers, rapists, murderers. He was officially sentenced for 71 murders, served over 40 years in prison, and then, get this, after he got out, he became a YouTuber. A YouTuber, campaigning against the exact kind of gang violence he used to be a part of. Just unbelievable. Okay, so let's take a step back. On one hand, you have these fictional anti-heroes that we absolutely adore. On the other, you have these real-life people who make us feel both horror and, weirdly, a little bit of sympathy. So what's the deal? How are we supposed to actually classify them? Is vigilante really the right word for them? Or, if you strip away all the motive and the backstory, does their behavior actually fit a much, much darker clinical definition? Well, to answer that, let's just look at the facts. Let's turn to the FBI. Their definition of a serial killer is super technical, and that's what's important here. It has nothing to do with why someone kills, it's all about how they kill. And there are 3 key ingredients. At least 3 murders, happening over a period of more than a month, with an emotional cooling off period in between. All right, so let's use that checklist on one of our fictional heroes. Let's take the Punisher. Does he commit at least 3 murders? Yeah. Try hundreds, if not thousands. Do they happen over more than a month? Yep, his war has been raging for decades in the comics. And does he have those cooling off periods? For sure. He plans, he strategizes, he rests, he rearms. This isn't just one long rampage. So, the verdict's pretty clear, isn't it?
When you look at it through that clinical lens, the conclusion is just inescapable. Dexter, the Punisher, even real-world guys like Pedro Rodriguez Filho, They aren't just vigilantes. They are, by the FBI's own definition, serial killers, plain and simple.
Okay, so they fit the profile. Check. But here's the next big question. Do they have the same motivations as the serial killers we think of? And this is where fiction and reality take a hard turn away from each other.
In the stories we love, the vigilante is all about a higher calling, right? It's a quest for justice to protect the innocent. But what does the actual data say about why real-world serial killers do what they do? Yeah, so when you look at the real data, one word is completely, glaringly absent: justice. The number one reason? Enjoyment. We're talking thrill, lust, a feeling of power. And what's number two? Simple financial gain, money. That noble crusade we love to watch on TV, it's not here. Not in the real world.
And this is where that huge gap between fantasy and reality just opens up. We romanticize the motive as justice for the helpless, but the reality is a craving for power and thrills. We imagine this strict moral code, but in the real world, the second biggest motivator is just cash. And that, right there, is the core of the entire fantasy, isn't it? We take the actions of a serial killer, but we swap out that monstrous psychology for a heroic one.
So that leads to the big question. If the reality is that dark, why are we so obsessed with the fantasy? Why do we feel like we need these characters?
Well, that appeal is so powerful that the Punisher's skull symbol has literally jumped off the comic book page and into the real world. You see it adopted by some US military units, including Navy SEALs. But it's also been used, pretty controversially, by some police officers and even anti-government militia groups. For a lot of people, that skull now represents this uncompromising, take-no-prisoners, outside-the-system kind of justice.
And this whole trend really bothers the guy who co-created the character, Jerry Conway. He's been pretty vocal about it. He argues that the Punisher was created to be a critique of a failing justice system. So for him, when he sees agents of that very system, like police officers using that symbol, it's a total contradiction. He literally said they're siding with an enemy of the system. That's a pretty powerful statement about what the character was supposed to mean. And really, that brings us right back to the beginning. The Punisher, Dexter, they resonate with us because they offer a simple, clean solution in a messy, complex world where real justice can often feel slow or unsatisfying or just out of reach. So maybe, just maybe, the most important question here isn't about the characters themselves, but about us. What does our collective fascination with these heroes, these anti-heroes, these monsters, what does it all really say about our own faith in the justice system?